From TMP to TTNG, for sure the cure and those tired meme jeans. Helican Sella and the promise ring. Sunny day, real estate and rights this spring. Prince Twinkle Daddies help keep the dream alive. I constantly thank God for Algernon and Remo Christie Front Drive. Mineral, snowing, high tide hotelier and more. Rio Limo only consists of the DC emotive hardcore. But you gotta admit, Kyle and Ellie really on that emo bullshit. You gotta admit that Kyle and Ellie really on that emo bullshit. Have you heard the tired and disavowed lonely word? Have you heard the disavowed and lonely word? Have you heard the lonely disavowed word? Have you heard the tired and lonely disavowed word?
This is episode 41 of the E-Word. My name is Kyle. I'm recording here in Madison, Wisconsin via Skype. I'm talking to my friend Ellie, who's over there in Austin, Texas. Ellie, it's been a couple weeks. What's up?
Not much. Things have been a little quiet on the You Don't Need Maps front, but there's going to be big things getting announced like within the next couple weeks. Probably around the time this episode comes out, big things will be announced. And I hope I can hijack the E-Word Twitter to signal boost, if that's cool.
That's what it's there for.
Yeah. I also made people really mad yesterday with the Modern Baseball tweet.
Yep. That was one of those things where it's like people I know IRL are kind of like, Kyle, was that you? I'm like,
It's never you is my favorite thing. No one IRL ever is like, yo, what the fuck, Ellie? So it's just always you being punished for like my bad behavior on Twitter.
yes. Well, this is the 2017, the rest of episode. We're recording out of order, and these will probably come out of order. But we have a great guest to talk about 2017 with us. We have David Anthony, who has written for a lot of places that you probably read, AV Club, Noisey. You're also on a podcast, but David, I'll let you go ahead and flesh that out.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm a freelancer, so I kind of take work where I can get it. Most people probably know me, if they know me at all, from being the music editor at the AV Club for a few years. Did a podcast with my pal Dan Ozzie for a while. Currently do a podcast with my buddy Tim about Alkaline Trio, because we're both from Chicago, as we are wont to do. Have a newsletter called Former Clarity that you can subscribe to, and yeah, just kind of out there doing the thing. Thanks for the kind intro. I'm sure I'm a big step down from what you guys were expecting to have from this episode, so thanks for still letting me do it.
Honestly, absolutely not. Kyle suggested Ian Cohen, and I was like, really? Him again?
Having also done podcasts with Ian Cohen, yes, him and I do not need to talk about emo together again on a podcast. Also, apologies to all your listeners. I have a little bit of a lisp. I had throat surgery a week ago today. My tongue is a little swollen from them having to move nerves around in my throat. But we're going to power through here.
I'm stoked.
As David, do you have anything to plug at the top here? Like, is there anything that people should be on lookout for, or should we be subscribing to As You Were?
Yeah, subscribe to As You Were. We're pretty deep into that whole experiment now, and it's kind of going off the rails in ways where we're just talking about. Even if you're not a fan of Alkaline Trio, I think there's stuff for you to find in it as we kind of talk about the state of what was like the weird world of punk in the mid to late 2000s and into the start of this decade. No huge... Well, I contributed to a pretty big emo-related writing project earlier this year. I literally turned in all my blurbs in January, and this is something that Ian Cohen put together, and it's still not run. So maybe if that ever comes out, that'll be a thing. But yeah, subscribe to As You Were, subscribe to the newsletter. That's davidanthony.substack.com. And that's about all for me. I'm kind of going to be laying low through the end of the year.
Hell yeah.
Cool. David, I wanted to ask, what do you think of this A Decade Under the Influence series that you're now guesting on? We were talking about a little bit before this, but you were someone who were like involved with this decade, like, you know, on the forefront of going to the shows, maybe covering it towards the middle to the end. You know, are we missing anything? Have we not shown some light onto something specifically?
I mean, I really love this series for a lot of reasons, and part of that is because I think emo in particular, it's always been a youth movement. Obviously, at the start of this decade, we saw a lot of reunions from, you know, some of the big players of the mid to late 90s, which is cool. But when I was coming up, obviously, like being from just outside Chicago, I got into the Cap and Jazz and Braid and all that kind of stuff. But very quickly, it was like going to see bands like Lion of the North, and then obviously that became Grown Ups, and bands like Algernon coming through and Snowing and all that shit. But even around then, it just felt like you were going to see local bands. Like, I remember the first time I saw Grown Ups was a show they played with that band Daylight, who became Super Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
It was in my hometown. It was a Monday night. It was Daylight, Grown Ups, this band called Erfurt, and this band called Like Bats, who were kind of like a, you know, that kind of like orgcore pop punk thing. And at the time, those worlds were still pretty overlapping. Like, a lot of these bands, people were just like, oh, it's just kind of, I remember people calling it twinkly pop punk. You know, people weren't even necessarily in my circle seeing it as emo, and there were 5 people at that show.
Fuck.
And like, I remember seeing Grown Ups, and like a lot of these bands are like Cloudmouth, a band from Chicago who I really loved, who had much more of like a shot maker kind of vibe. I would see these bands play through 6 people, you know, and one of my favorite memories of that time is there was a venue here called Strange Light, which was run by the guys from Cloudmouth, and it was below the Congress Theater. And I think it was the Snowing 1994 tour. It was a winter tour, and they played the same night at Strange Light that Wu-Tang Clan was playing the venue above. And it was a really funny like culture clash of like people waiting in line to go see Wu-Tang who were like hours and hours late, and like kids like going in through the side door to see these bands. So yeah, I mean, for me, what I like about the series is it kind of touches on a lot of stuff, and I think both of you really understand the importance of things like that, where at the time I was just writing like zines or writing for blogs. Like, I remember reviewing the Grown Ups releases for like just like a blog I wrote for, and I didn't know anyone else who cared at the time. And I just kind of always, like, coming up, I didn't really care about the bigger music media because I didn't cover shit I cared about. You know, I didn't care about Pitchfork or any of that because I was like, oh, this just isn't for me. Who cares? So it's cool to see that obviously emo in this decade has gotten a lot more of a rep, and people care about it more in the kind of overground music press. But it still has the people like you both who are a part of it and are really continuing to do a better job of detailing that history than I think a lot of people do. So kudos to both of you.
Hey, thanks. Means a lot.
Yeah, I mean, like, specifically you hit on Grown Ups a bunch, which is a band that we hardly got to talk about because they didn't get the votes because they were up against, like, Algernon and Snowing in those years. But, I think that's a band that is, like, criminally not documented at all.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's really funny because, like, they were just, like, I remember at that show, my friend Kyle, who played bass in Like Bats and then ended up joining Grown Ups and played on the Handholder EP at the end of the band, he came up to me and he was like, "Oh, have you seen them?" And I was like, "No, like, what are they like?" He's like, "Oh, dude, it's just Blink-182 doing American football songs." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, that was literally how people talked about him. Or like people would be like, "It's Latterman, but like American football," and we'd be like, "Okay, I got it." But for me, like, that was like my local band. You know, they were from Northwest Indiana. I saw them all the time. I saw them, thankfully, all the time, because they also canceled shows all the fucking time. Were notoriously unreliable. And and there was like, I remember going to the Grown Ups More Songs record release show, and it was like basically like a festival. There were like 7 bands playing. They didn't go out until like after 2 a.m. It was fucking chaos. But yeah, I mean, all those bands to me, like, that was really where I was super excited by all that stuff, and it still felt very nebulous. There was not really the emo revival term. And I remember just like when all those bands started breaking up, like Grown Ups, Cloudmouth, Snowing, Algernon, I was like, oh, it's over. Like, I'm not interested in this anymore. And obviously it kept going. But that's still kind of true. Like, for me, that was kind of my golden era. Everything after that is like, there's a lot of great bands and a lot of great records, but I'm much more selective of it because I'm more of an outsider to it now, and I recognize that.
If I can interject, I think part of the reason that grown-ups get short shrift, even though they were definitely like one of the more popular bands of their time, is because, you know, there's a lot of like cult love in screamo circles for like Lion of the North, but when Lion of the North broke up, part of that band became Grown Ups, and then another part of that band became La Dispute.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have kind of like that like divergent tree effect.
Oh yeah.
And La Dispute, of course, ended up being like a crossover phenomenon in a way that Grown Ups never could be, or I think wanted to be.
Oh, totally.
And
I mean, I not to interrupt you there, but like, I think one of the points too is Grown Ups position themselves as like a Chicago punk band. Like, the fact that More Songs was recorded by Matt Allison, which is a choice that you would only make if you were kids who grew up on like Alkaline Trio and the Lawrence Arms. And that dude did not know how to record that fucking record. That record doesn't sound very good. Like, it's fine for what it is, but like, you can hear like woes being punched in and kind of cut off in different spots. And like, to me, that's really endearing. But like, I totally understand why someone hearing that is like, I don't understand why this sounds like this. I don't understand the decisions being made both artistically and musically.
Right. Yeah.
So it just doesn't feel as, it feels more indebted to the things that it was coming out of, as opposed to a La Dispute, which, though obviously pulling from the Me Without You well, I think for a lot of people was, wow, this is a brand new thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
David, do you have any big love for that band, the Clippers, who are from Chicago?
I thought the Clippers were from Boston. Maybe I'm wrong. I do like the Clippers a lot. My girlfriend, Nina, who is also a music writer and also has a lot of love for this type of stuff, I kind of slept on them. I knew about
they were
the
from
Clippers
they were from Massachusetts. Maybe I've just watched a lot of videos of them playing in Chicago. I thought they were from Chicago. Or no, they did the split.
They did the split with Coping, right?
And that's a Chicago band.
Yeah, Coping was a Chicago band.
Yeah, I flip-flopped.
So yeah, I mean, honestly, like, I do like both those bands a lot. The Clippers, I kind of got into retroactively, but I think that An Evening with EP is really great.
Yeah.
This whole time, I thought the Clippers were an LA team.
Well done, my friend.
Are we gonna do the whole "Where Were You in 2017" vibe?
I say so.
2017 vibe check.
Yeah, I can start because 2017 was the year that I kind of lost my mind, and then I started this podcast.
Sick.
No,
Love it.
Big same.
Honestly, relatable when I get to my part.
Yeah, 2017. I feel like I did lose my mind for the majority of that year. I was also heavily. Well, no, I think 2016 to 2017, I was really into art emo, like being active on it and like giving way too much of a shit about it and what people were saying. But we did start this podcast. It was basically at the end of the fall, and that we were up and running by then. But yeah, I was losing my mind. I was working full time, and I had a part time internship, which I didn't need to be doing, but it turned into the job that I wanted to get, so it was worth it. But that wasn't happening in 2017, where it became worth it. So yeah, I was on a downward spiral in 2017, but everything came into place in 2018.
I was also a horrible fucking wreck in 2017. Just a massive self-destructive spiral. I did manage to finally get out of like the fucking heroin den that I was living in. I too spent way too much time and emotion involved in REMO and the adjacent Discord servers. One of these days, I might like devote a bonus podcast episode to just the drama of the Discord servers, even though like maybe 12 people would care, but like that was just like an interpersonal nightmare. And then at the very end, you started this podcast, and I kind of like latched onto it very quickly because I already could tell that this would be like my one like ocean of stability.
Yeah, for me, I also started a podcast in 2017 called No Plus Ones with my buddy Dan Ozzie, but that was also the year I left my job as music editor of AV Club. So I left that job in March, did another office job that was a nightmare, and I left after like 4 months, and then started freelancing full time. So I was doing the podcast, freelancing full time, and just like completely pulled the rug out from under my life, and then had to figure out if I could make it work.
Wow. We all were in transition in 2017 to better things, it sounds like.
Hell yeah.
So this is a very strange year in terms of releases for this podcast because we have one clear winner, only one record that got more than 30 votes, another single record that got more than 20 votes, and then the rest were just like 15 or below. And usually it's like,
wow.
Yeah.
So like usually it's like we can compartmentalize these into like, here's 5 records that got like 30 votes, but like no, it was just I think it was just the effect that there were a lot of records and just maybe very few just like front runners.
And I was texting you earlier, I feel like a big problem is that a lot of these records are not the record for the band in question.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. A lot of those records, I mean, a lot of those bands already had their record. It seemed like. I mean, maybe we can like come to a conclusion at the end of it, but like, yeah, this is a very strange year because like a lot of these records are hardly emo, etc. But I guess, do we want to spoil what the big winner is?
By the time this episode comes out, we'll have already done that episode, right?
Unless we release them out of order.
Unless we release them out of order. Okay. I don't know. Maybe we should just skip it.
Okay.
Because either way, people will know.
Yeah.
Either way, people.
Yeah. Will know. There will either be a big omission or you won't know. So the only
it
one
will be very obvious looking at this list of records which one that is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yes. We'll skip down to the only one that had 30 plus votes, which is surprising, but it's Swordfish with that album Rodea, which I mean,
I was very surprised with this. Yeah.
In 2017, this band broke up, and people didn't really care, or they didn't care that they broke up. It was just not that hot of a record. But now
there was a cancellation too. I think
there was
really
there.
Yeah, there was a cancellation. It got reversed.
Yeah,
but
my God,
it got picked up by Fox for the mid-season.
Nice, good, as it should.
I remember in 2017 we talked about that on the podcast because it was the same episode we talked about Modern Baseball's final show. So we talked about
Yeah.
I remember getting sent this record Yeah, because I'm kind of friends with the guy that runs the label, Takes Us to Heart Records, and he sent me this. And I was like, oh fuck, this has that one song. I don't know what it's called. $10 she says. You think about her more than she thinks about you. That's a huge line that people still talk about on Twitter and stuff. But like, I knew that song was a hit, and like, yeah, people really ride for this band now.
I remember when I revisited it for this episode, I remember being surprised at how short the album was and how kind of laid back it sounds. Like when I see like a 23-minute record, I expect it to be like a rager, but this is not really a rager. There's like lots of slow stuff. It builds, like there's definitely like payoffs, but lots of just kind of like dreamy, horn. What's the word I'm looking for? Like
Horn dog.
Horn dog, correct. Horn accents like added to it. I feel like their brass section didn't need to be like as big of a part of their sound as it ended up being. It just kind of was adjacent to the rest of their songwriting. But I did think it was like a pleasant experience, like a 6.5 to 7 out of 10. I don't remember why I was like super stoked on it when it came out.
Well, I didn't realize this until just now, but it was recorded by Nick from the Swellers, and it was mastered by Cam.
Oh, okay.
Makes sense. For me, this is a band I definitely remember, to bring up our friend Ian again. I remember him kind of big upping this, and I checked it out, and I was just similarly, I was like, this is cool, but there was nothing that made me want to go back to it, really. 2017 was also kind of a year where some of the stuff that was on the ballot I liked, but I would say isn't really emo in how I would describe the genre. But I was also making a turn back into more heavy and aggressive music, so a lot of this more kind of sedate, chilled out emo just kind of didn't really speak to me, because I was like, well, it doesn't have the energetic thrust that I tend to long for in this type of thing. And it also doesn't have kind of the really, it's not committing fully to being a lush produced album. It kind of felt like this is a band that could grow into being a cool band, but was just like, it's an admirable effort is how I would have described it at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no blast beats or breakdowns, so
Correct.
I don't know what I liked about it. Now that
Hard to say.
Yeah.
I am really curious on like how people are finding out about this record afterwards, because like it's a band that broke up and like kind of stopped promoting themselves, and I think there's members of the band in that band Ness Lake, but yeah, it seems like a very random one to be living on.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting how things on the internet can really take on a second life, and I think that's kind of what I was getting at when I was talking about being there for some of those early shows, was like, of like grown-ups and stuff, is like, yeah, we can, through certain YouTube videos or things like that, really begin to think that a band had a bigger impact than they actually did when most of their existence was playing to borderline empty rooms. And I do wonder how much of this is, and I think part of the thing that I find always really interesting about emo in particular is how, like, you never know what the first record that the next generation hears is going to be. And I wonder how much this was just like for a certain group of kids, like one of the first things that they felt was theirs, and those people are now just still into it and continue to bang that drum a little bit.
I believe it.
I agree with that take. Spot on.
Why, thank you.
It's almost like you know what you're talking about when it comes to music or something.
I mean, I wouldn't say that. I do a podcast about alkaline trios. Jesus.
All right. Only one with 20 plus votes. I was surprised by this one, being so high up in the mix.
Yeah, it could easily get lumped into the next one, I feel like. But that record is Tiger's Jaw Spin.
Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the one that they put out on Will Yip's label, Memory Music. I think it was like the first release or something that got to put out, which is like a major label-backed thing. I remember I listened to the first single and I was like, and I didn't listen to the album when it came out. I recently saw Tiger's Jaw. They played Madison for the first time ever, and I revisited Spin because that was most of what they were playing on their set. And it was better than I thought it was. I had a better reaction to just the when it came out.
So the thing about Tiger's Jaw is that their later records, which always sound like mediocre indie rock, like on the album, come across much heavier and more energetic live.
Yeah.
Because they're like such a seasoned touring act at this point. And like, I feel like the songs off Charmer especially benefit from like a live performance.
Yeah.
But going back and listening to this one, I was like, wow, this is so non-descriptive.
I
is
agree
like
with that
a
word
mush.
so much.
It's
Just like applesauce with no flavor is what this record feels like.
Well, I'm gonna. So I have two things to say. The first is I, with almost no exception, hate Will Yip's production. I think he's a fucking coward, and makes the most boring, safe fucking choices for bands that are otherwise really creative. Be that
yeah, come on the podcast.
Yeah, come on the podcast and say, who said what about me? But what I will say is I agree with Ellie a lot, is that I feel that Tiger's Jaw is a band, again, I saw very early. And to tell a very funny story, I think it was the first LP, the Pizza cover one, not the one before that, had just come out, and they were playing... the first good one. And they were playing Beat Kitchen here in Chicago. It was them, the Sidekicks, that band Like Bats I talked about, and then the Brokedowns. And the Brokedowns were like a orgcore, like drunk punk band. Yep. It was a Sunday. Again, I think maybe 50 people showed up. The room was pretty empty. And Tiger's Jaw played the worst set, one of the worst sets I've ever seen in my fucking life. And I vividly remember it was the guy Ben, the tall guy who's still in the band. He played the entire show with his back to the crowd. And then Adam, before the last song, was like, you know what is going to get all you guys excited? I'm going to take my shirt off. And then he's popped his shirt off for the last song and played shirtlessly. And everyone was like, what is going on? And I think they like broke their kick drum and like they were super awkward. And I was like, whoa, I really like this band. And that was like terrible. And then they came back like probably 6 to 8 months later, played the same room, and it was sold out. And they were much more together. But honestly, well, I have a bigger affection for the records that Adam is on. I think they became a better live band after he left. And I also feel like those songs, like, they're basically this big, like, early 90s alt-rock songs. Like, these are basically, like, unwritten Gin Blossom songs. So I can't be too mad at that, but it's also just, like, it doesn't really compel me to feel any kind of way about it.
Unwritten Gin Blossom song sounds great when I'm thinking about, like, how much I love New Miserable Experience.
Exactly.
And not so great when I think about everything that band did after New Miserable Experience.
Exactly.
This will be weird because didn't Patrick on Axe to Grind say that he saw the worst performance that he saw in like Europe or something, and it was like a Tiger's Jaw set?
Yes, and they were really drunk, and Ben kept trying to take his shirt off. It was Ben, that Patrick said, not Adam, but like sideways. Like, through the shirt hole, like through the armhole.
So,
maybe there's a common lineage here. They might have just been really drunk, but it was like a Sunday afternoon, like borderline matinee. Like they played at like 4 p.m. It was a very odd day.
They were living the life.
Mm-hmm. They sure were. But yeah, I mean, they're just the kind of band at this point where like I kind of respect them almost just because they're like, we're gonna keep going and keep trying to perfect the perfect pop song as if that already hasn't been written, and that's it's a noble goal in and of itself. But when I this record is just like very kind of uninspired to me.
You know what I would actually compare post Adam Tiger's Jaw to more than Gin Blossoms is every Lemonheads record except for It's a Shame About Ray.
Nailed it. Yeah, that's pretty perfect.
Just that same like Evan Dando trying and failing to grasp like the perfect 3-minute pop song.
Yeah, and like the
Gets
Lemonheads
close.
I get why people love the Lemonheads, but I need one LP and I'm checked out on the rest of it.
I only really need My Drug Buddy.
Fair. I think Rudderless is a pretty perfect song, but I mean that record it's the one, and I think honestly, like if a band can have one wall-to-wall great record, that's not that easy to do, and I think Tiger's Jaw has come pretty close to that on a couple of occasions, but for the most part, in the modern world, I just feel like they're on every tour anymore.
Yeah.
Like I see a tour get announced, I'm like, Tiger's Jaw, 3rd of 4. Like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're one of those bands that probably just needs to put out an album every 3 years to keep going on tour and keep people and keep themselves in the feeds and on the tours and stuff. But that's always like a sad thing to watch, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on how it goes. I think like if you see a band that's kind of grinding it out, putting in that work because they're trying to transition to something new, try to do something different, and clearly have a long play for where they're trying to go. I think that can be really compelling because I love bands that do that. I love people that evolve and really go from, we started out here and we built to this other thing, and you can like that whole ride. But to me, I think my issue with a lot of bands, not to really pick on Tiger's Jaw, but bands of this ilk, is that they really came out the gate firing, and now they're doing a more simplified, safer version of what made those early records so inspired and exciting. They've removed the kind of messiness and kind of guesswork that made those songs feel so memorable and exciting, and are just replacing it with like, well, this is how you write a good song, So to your point, like with a band like that, it's kind of sad to watch them just kind of continually put out variations on the same 10 songs over and over again.
But honestly, they're one of the longest running emo bands currently. Like the first album came out in 2006. They're coming up on 15 years?
14 years, or 15 years.
Yeah,
wild.
Cool.
This next section, I'm probably gonna become more positive as we get lower down the list, but out of this batch of like 7 records, I only enjoy 1.
Okay. So this is a name without anything in specific. Like it's called, the section is called Big Bands with Low Key Duds. Low Key Duds can mean that your record wasn't good to a lot of people. It could mean that it didn't turn out at the polls very well, which is surprising for a lot of these. So I'm not calling any of these ones in particular duds in quality, but I know for a fact a lot of people will put that on to many of them on this list. So Free Throw, Bear Your Mind, The Front Bottoms, Going Gray, The World is a Beautiful Place, Always Foreign, Prawn, Run, Rainer Maria, Self-Titled, Turnover, Good Nature, Pet Symmetry, Good Vision. I will run through and add some comments here. Free Throw, Bear Your Mind. I think this is one that no one really loves. It's not their record for sure. They went in a weird pop punk production style that turned me off. However, this is when they were starting to get even bigger and bigger. And they kind of broke into that pop punk circuit. Like they're touring with like Knuckle Puck and stuff. The Front Bottoms, Going Gray. This is a stinker. I think we all know that. This is where everyone kind of turned their backs on that band who were with them from the first couple records. The World's a Beautiful Place, always foreign. I don't think I have been stoked for a record in 2017 as much as this one, because I was a fanboy at this point, and this thing I tried so hard to love, but only got to about like liking it. Like, I kind of liked it. I had like a half crush on it. Prawn, Run. This one, extremely underrated. I feel like people gave so much of a shit about Kingfisher, and then when this came out, it was like radio silence. But the album has some really good tracks on it. I don't think this band even tours anymore, so that kind of doesn't help it. Rainer Maria, self-titled. I was excited for this record. It's not one of those records from like a reunion band that I'm like mad that it came out. It's not one of those cases where it like sullies like a perfect catalog. But it's pretty good, and I saw someone call it their album of the year, which I thought was surprising because I don't think it was anywhere near that. Turnover, Good Nature. I don't hate this record. I think it's fine. It's not Peripheral Vision. It's not emo. Never were. And then Pet Sematary, Good Vision. I really like this record, actually. I didn't like Pets, Hounds, but I thought this one is like 8 times better than that.
All right. Free Throw, Bear Your Mind. You're right. This is definitely the record that got them like pop punk traction. The weird thing about Free Throw is that because they keep putting out like these pop punk records and getting on pop punk tours, their fan base continually grows and grows. Mm-hmm. But it seems that even the new fans really only seem to care about their old shit, which is unfortunate. It's not that I think the songwriting itself is bad. It's just that it feels a lot less passionate than their earlier stuff. Maybe it's the production, maybe it's the performances. I don't know. It just like isn't hitting for me. The Front Bottoms, Going Gray. Even if you like enjoyed their older stuff, like even if you were like, you know what, Talon of the Hawk's got some jams, I don't understand how you could enjoy Going Gray. I think that this is like an actual affront to music. It might be like my least favorite album of 2017. Now that I think about it, it's just a horrendous piece of shit.
It's hard to believe that they wrote the songs. Like, considering what they wrote before, like it seems like someone brought this to them to perform.
It feels like you know how Homer Simpson has like a crayon stuck in his brain, and that's what makes him stupid. It's like some just like lodged crayons like just poked them all over Brian Sella's head, like, and they're just there, and he's just been slowly degrading since like 2008. The World is a Beautiful Place, always foreign. I remember this record actually having like some controversy when it came out because it was after Nicole got kicked out, and people were saying that like there's like a veiled diss track about her on this record, and people were saying that it was like transphobic or ableist or something. I can't really speak to whether or not that's true. All I know is that I listened to this record once and have never felt the urge to listen to it again. Prawn Run, I guess I can see like why someone who really likes Prawn would like this record, but as someone who really liked Kingfisher specifically, this one just like didn't do much for me. The Rainer Maria record, I think, is absolutely stellar. I'm not going to say it's better than their 90s material, but it does feel like that band kind of came into its own identity, I think, with like the members being like more sure of who they were in life.
Right.
And that like, assuredness comes through like in the songwriting for sure. Turnover, Good Nature is also a pile of garbage, but it's not nearly like as objectionable as the Front Bottoms record. I just think it's I call Better Oblivion Community Center audio ambient, but that is definitely like a good description for Good Nature. And then Pet Sematary, Good Vision is extremely boring. Don't feel it at all.
All right, I'm going to run through them too. I took notes so I can do this unassisted. Free Throw, Do Not Care.
Sick.
Yeah, first record's fine. I know I wrote about it when I was at the AV Club, in part because I was like, this is all right, and I want to, like, you know, have a take, I guess. But after that, like, their name sounds like they would be a pop punk band, and they became a pop punk band. Front Bottoms sounds like if Mountain Goats was fronted by Tom DeLonge on this record, and I fucking hate it. It's like if Angels and Airwaves was like, I don't know, really into Jesus, even more than he already is. It's very bad. I don't like it. Not at all my thing. The World Is record, I mean, I think it's really hard to follow up a record like Harmlessness, which I really did think was everything coming together for that band.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, they had some really good songs and a lot of songs that, like, to piggyback on a Simpsons reference, were basically elevators to nowhere, where it's just like a crescendo into nothing. And I think Harmlessness was really well crafted. There's a couple good songs on this, but much like It Sounds Both of You, never really feel the need to go back to. Prawn is a band that I really like the Ships EP, and I do like Kingfisher. This one's just kind of okay. I feel like Prawn at their worst is just kind of a middle of the road emo band, and at their best is really inspired and takes a lot of risks. But this record just kind of felt like, new Prawn, whatever. I agree with you both. That Ray Maria record is sick. It's very different, and I know people who are not emo people who like that record better than any of their other ones, so I don't think your take, Ellie, is that controversial. It does have a little bit more of that, like, hum-inspired space rock sound brought into it, which I think is an interesting flavor for them, and I think live this material really comes across well, but I don't think it's a record people care about that much. Yeah, Turnover, totally audio ambient, not a thing I dig. And Pet Symmetry, I am friends with all those dudes, and I do like the songs on this record a lot. I went out with them for a brief tour before, so my objectivity is kind of out the window there. But I think that's a really good record.
I guess if we can talk about Prawn for a split second more, I'm surprised that the quality of this record mattered so much, because Free Throw, they kept getting bigger on it, and there was a ton of anticipation for this record, and I think it didn't it wasn't Kingfisher Part 2, and people were just sometimes that matters so
Guilty.
much, and sometimes it doesn't.
I mean, I feel like Prawn was a band that I always felt never really hit the people they were trying to hit somehow. And maybe this is just my experiences seeing them. But there's only one time, and it was right when Kingfisher came out, that I actually felt like they got a kind of big crowd response. But I always felt they were a band that was before that, I was they're kind of underrated. I think they're going to be really good. And then after that, I was kind of I think they made the record they were destined to make, and then just kind of kept going. And yeah, it's not bad. It just doesn't really inspire much feeling from me.
Yeah. I'm intrigued about this next section, Kyle. I'm surprised that you put it in.
I put in there because I think this shows that there's a big pitfall in where those votes could have gone to, and because we have two canceled records. They were both canceled that year, because I remember if you put these on your list, you were kind of a dick. Brand New, Science Fiction, Sorority Noise, You're Not As Blank As You Think.
I think Sorority Noise might have been early 2018, actually, because I remember it won Emo Album of the Year.
Shit,
and
yes,
it was the background image, and we had to take it down.
That's right. Oh yeah, because they did that alternate edition, and then I think got canceled. Okay, yeah. Not that we have to talk about these records, but clearly these would have been
They would have gotten a lot of votes, even from our woke listeners, I feel like. So the interesting thing to me about these two records is that a band being canceled ultimately, it never actually impacts how I think of the quality of their music, just how much I feel going back to it. I rarely go back to Brand New, even though I thought Science Fiction was a really good record, and I don't think that band actually has a musically bad record in their catalog. And Sorority Noise, I almost felt relieved when they got canceled, because then I didn't have to like pretend to take them seriously.
Ooh.
That's harsh.
I do like the 2014 record Joy Departed, but the first record has some tracks on it. Like the lyrics are really bad, but it's got some tracks. This record is like actually bad.
I remember hearing Cam in interviews say that he like wrote a lot of these songs in like one sitting, and I was like, that's not surprising. That's also maybe why I'm not like getting anything to chew on for this record.
Yeah, I won't go so far as to say like they clearly didn't care while they were writing these songs, but I don't care about these songs.
Fair. I will jump in and say that, I mean, I really like Brand New. I really like that record. So had things not happened the way they did, I would probably have more to say about it. With Sorority Noise, going to kind of plead the fifth on it and just say that I was friendly with Cam when all this was going down. Him and I were texting back and forth, and I'm glad he got the help he needed. Mm-hmm. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and Sorority Noise stood for a lot, and I think like that's something that is kind of an awkward thing to think about in retrospect.
Oh yeah,
but emotionally, it was just like a disastrous blow to the scene.
Yeah, one of the biggest advocates now flipped on his head. So yeah, I guess another awkward category is huge adjacent records. If these were on the list, the votes would have gone to probably a bunch, like a lot of votes would have ended up in this section. Remo Drive, greatest hits. This year was basically on our emo. Remo is emo, and then mods being like, no.
Good.
Yeah, they're not emo. I was the only mod who didn't care if they got posted. Because like if the DIY scene loves them and no other forums are willing to talk about them, sure, throw them on our email, which I think is what I even said in like the first episode we ever recorded. But this band is both extremely mediocre and not emo, in my opinion. They just kind of sound like like super chunk on Xanax.
They're just not good. They're a bad band. Like I don't know. That's all I got on that one.
I feel like I shouldn't even speak up and be like, "This is a pretty good record." Like they're.
Kyle, you're killing me.
Like I don't love them. Like I think I've heard a lot of the things that inspired them, and people would say that they're ripping off. But I still like, I don't know. Every time they've come through Mass, and I have at least hit the pit with the kids for "You're Killing Me" or the Slux songs that I feel like it. I kind of get what they're doing, so I feel like I'm already like unlocked this band is overrated gene. You know what I mean?
Fair.
Right. Okay.
I'm just too old for it. I think that's what it is. And also, like, I probably shouldn't say this on a podcast, but what do I have to lose? Who cares? They're doing fine. The only band that ever tried to payola me was Remo Drive.
That ever tried to what?
Payola?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Where they like try to pay me to cover them.
Honestly, if Remo Drive paid me, I would take back everything I've ever said about that band.
Wait, so
Elliot, wasn't enough money to go through that. Your reputation is worth more.
Hold on.
Maybe if Remo Drive in 2019 tried to payola me.
Yes, not back then.
So this makes me think another thing. So they were one of the bands that Anthony Fantano just for no reason like gave a chance. Like band put out this record, and then he gave it like a full review. Do you think that it was a money thing?
I don't know. I don't want to speculate on Fantano's business. I'm sure he's doing pretty well, but I don't know. I know this band pretty early on had a little bit of a machine behind them, and I remember I would get premiere requests all the time, and it was the only one that was like, if you do this, we'll send you this much money, and I felt so deeply gross that I was like, no, this is not worth. And it was also like,
right.
if it was a band I liked, I'd be like, oh, I'll cover this. You do not pay me. That's not how this works. And I've had to say that to like a lot of bands that were just starting out that I covered who didn't understand how the world worked. This was bad enough where I was like, I do not want my name attached to this. Like, ugh.
Well,
Yeah. So do we have our like official like industry plant accusation now?
Sure, run with it.
Cool.
I don't know, because they kind of came off with this band that just had like a bunch of great music videos and stuff, and then I remember the Fantano review like more or less broke them, like because it was very, very positive, and they were like an unknown band.
Of course, it was positive. They're boring indie rock.
All right. The other huge adjacent record was the Menzingers After the Party, which I feel like this one was like everywhere. Like, what was the record before this? On the Impossible Past? No.
Rented World.
Rented World. I feel like that one was like, all right, the hype machine is building, and this like Menzingers record like got into every punk subgenres, like jerk off scene.
And like, and it's weird because for me, this is when the Menzingers finally exhausted all the goodwill they'd built up with On the Impossible Past.
Same.
Like, I was like, you're really gonna write this record again?
I mean, it's when they became they're just a parody of themselves, especially now.
Yes.
For me, again, not to just keep playing the old guy card, but like I saw them play my hometown on that first LP, which also is not very good. And then the second record's okay. They put out that Hold On Dodge 7-inch, which is where I was like, oh, okay, they're starting to figure it out. On the Impossible Past, I think, is great for what it is. Rented World has some tracks, but this one I remember coming out, and I wrote a review of it at the time for AV, and I think I gave it like a C- or something, because I'm like, there's 2 or 3 really good songs, but there's also 9 other ones that are just like boilerplate Menzingers topics and structures and riffs. And especially now, it's just like someone needs to shake them and be like, you guys can stop doing this. It's okay. Like, please do something else.
But are you kidding me?
Like,
they are making so much money. They have fucking VIP packages now.
I know.
Yeah.
I think this is around the time they went on tour with Sublime with Rome.
What?
And I
What?
imagine that crossover helped them.
So, would you say that Menzingers are now like the most successful orgcore band?
Probably. I mean, I think it depends
depending on if you want to consider Alkaline Trio,
or like even like a Gaslight Anthem who got real big, and they aren't a band anymore. But I mean, of the current concerns of bands that came of age when punk news already existed, without question.
Yeah.
And like, I don't begrudge them their success, and I've seen them like bring out a lot of cool openers and do cool package tours and stuff. But I just do not feel compelled by what they do album to album. But I think they're one of those bands that like they've kind of unlocked the code where it's like, all right, well, we've got the record or 2 everyone loves, so we just need to have records that have 3 good songs that we can slot into our set, and people will still think we're a fucking great band, you know? And I think that's really what their fan base is people who like are like only looking for 3 good new Menzinger songs every year.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just want to break.
They have sick of it all syndrome.
Yeah, basically. The cult is there. They don't need more. They're fine.
I just feel bad, and I need to break the fourth wall for a second. Just apologize to the audience, because like we got 3 people, and we can't even say a single good thing about the Menzingers record that everyone loves. So people officially are gonna be like, "Fuck this podcast."
Welcome to my life. I mean, like, I remember writing that review and people just being like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is the best record since On the Impossible Past, which, like, it's been 1 record. Calm down. But also, like, if you like them, I'm not going to disparage that. Like, I totally understand why people dig it so much. And I would say that orgcore scene is so stagnant and dead that if you're gonna pick one band from it, it might as well be this one. Like,
Yeah.
if that's a sound you really like, what are your alternatives in the present moment? Like a bunch of like third-rate pop punk bands that like couldn't write a song to save their fucking lives. Might as well go with the Menzingers.
Yeah, every Menzingers fan should just go listen to Junior Battles instead.
Or literally anything else, but you know,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is what it is.
Or they could just stay at home and drink and listen to Dillinger 4.
Yeah.
I will
That's
not
what
take
that's what
any
they'd be
Dillinger
doing.
4 slander on this podcast, though. That's where I draw the line.
I feel like all three of us love Dillinger 4.
Yeah, of
Okay,
course.
good.
Of course.
I saw them like 2 weeks ago. It was fucking awesome. But I'm also from Chicago, so I get to do that.
So the rest of the list is not, believe it or not, this is not everything. There's just stuff that I just left out because I don't know if we could even talk about it. But these were debuts and follow-up records. That's how I categorized the rest of this pool. It's sizable. I'm going to run through it. Oliver Houston, Whatever Works. The Obsessives, self-titled. Katie Ellen, Cowgirl Blues. I Hate Sex, World of Grief. Great Grandpa, Plastic Cough. Graduating Life, An Introduction to Rock and Roll. Del Paxton, All Day and Every Night. Diet Sig, Swear I'm Good at This. Cara Cara. Summer Megalith. Bliss, No One Loves You. Strange Ranger, Day Moon. Sinai Vessel. Broken Legged. Perspective, A Lovely Hand to Hold. What Not to Do. I'm going to add some comments on most of these. Oliver Houston, Whatever Works. This is my favorite album of the year for emo. I thought this thing was just packed full of riffs, really interesting choices on every song, really. Like, there is not a bad song in this record. I think that's rare for emo in this age. But yeah, this band, fuck you for breaking up so early. The Obsessive, self-titled. This one has some hype behind it, and I think it's a great follow-up. It sounds very indie rock. That was my comment on it. Katie Ellen, Cowgirl Blues. I saw them a couple times that year and was really impressed. Didn't listen to the album enough. I listened to it today. Ellie, I know you listened to it, so we'll talk. Well, you'll probably give it a lot of shine. But this album is underrated as hell. I Hate Sex, World of Grief. Have not listened to this record. Still haven't. My bad.
Yo, what the fuck?
Great Grandpa, Plastic Cough, indie rock record. I Kill Giants, members in it. Sick record. Graduating Life, an introduction to rock and roll. I have hardly listened to this record since 2017. It's fun as fuck. Del Paxton, extremely underrated band. This is a pretty cool math rock record that came out on Top Shelf that year. Diet Sig. Lots of drama around this record. Remember when the Pitchfork review came out and everyone was like giving death threats to that person that wrote that review? Fun times.
Oh shit! Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Absolutely hate this record.
Good.
Cara Cara, didn't listen to it until this year, and it's solid. Bliss, I haven't listened to this record since 2017, but I just remember the old emo dudes loved it for some reason. I don't know why it hit them so hard. It's a cool record, though. Strange Ranger was not on board with this record. I think I spent a lot of time with it, and I don't love it still, but I kind of get what they were going for, and they've made a better record since. Sinai Vessel, amazing band, amazing record. Perspective, had no idea they had. I had no idea that this came out like in 2017. I thought it came out in like late last year, but really good band.
Okay, Oliver Houston, Whatever Works. Absolutely fucking sick record. Is probably like the pinnacle of the form. Like when it comes to what I ended up calling sparkle punk around this time. Obsessive, self-titled. This is the first, or sorry, it's not the first on this list, but it is definitely like the prime example of, well, shit, it's not the one that came out before. You know, like it's not Heck No Nancy. Even if I divorce it from the context of like the really good stuff that they had done prior to this record, I still am not feeling it. Like you said, it's indie rock, which, you know, that's the death knell for me. Yeah, Katie Ellen, Cowgirl Blues. I slept on this record. Like, holy shit, it's a fucking phenomenal album. And Kyle, you said this doesn't seem like an Ellie record when I told you how much I enjoyed it. You were like, you don't really go for that singer-songwriter type of emo, but like, it's not. This isn't Julian Baker like.
No.
Like sleepy songwriting that like sounds bored with itself, and it's not Aaron West in the Roaring Twenties, which is like insufferably precious. It's just really good, energetic, passionate, from the heart, emo influenced indie rock. And it's got that really fucking brutal like acoustic track, the one that's like, I don't want to fuck you in our bed anymore. Like, holy shit, it just wrecked me on the bus. I Hate Sex, World of Grief. This is actually probably my favorite record on this list. Like, stellar screamo. Like, peak of the form at this time. Great Grandpa Plastic Cough. This band is what Roswell Kids should be. Definite strong Weezer influence. Crunchy power pop. Hooks galore. If you like Weezer and wish they weren't problematic, or if you like Roswell Kid and wish that they wrote songs that went somewhere, give Great Grandpa a try. Graduating Life and Introduction to Rock and Roll. I probably liked this when it came out, but because Bart's voice has become like an actual like allergen to me, I can't go back to it. And the lyrics are like atrocious. Del Paxton, All Day and Every Night. It's fine. It does what it's trying to do. Diet Sig. I really, really enjoy this album. Sorry.
Hot take.
I love Diet Sig. Like, I think they're a great band. Why don't you guys like this record? I don't get it.
I don't like it because I like the EP's previous a lot, specifically the 7-inch that came out before it. I think those two songs are their best songs. And then I had seen them a lot and was very excited for this record. And then when I heard it, I was just like, the version that I already have. So it's not that I dislike the band at all. It's just that I find this group of songs not to be their most compelling.
I saw this band touring out this record, and they played with the Front Bottoms. Maybe it was because they played with the Front Bottoms, but I really loved Diet Sig.
Fair.
You know? But I thought this record was phenomenal. It's more like pop hooks that just like dig in your skin. And
I mean, yeah,
I think
I
her
guess...
voice is really good for the genre. I feel like it's genuinely like unique, and I think their songwriting perspective is really unique. And I do like their EPs maybe a little bit better. I like Over Easy a lot. But this is still a pretty great record.
I think to spoil my hand here a little bit, the Katie Ellen record did everything I wanted this record to do a little better. That's the one that
I didn't even think to compare the two.
Like, I rode for that Katie Ellen record real hard when it came out because it just lyrically I thought was very simple and moving. I thought the songs didn't try to do too much, but still had a lot of meat on the bones. I think that's the best record Anika's made, and I would have nothing but kind things to say about it. I wrote a big profile of her around that record for Noisey, and I just think it had a more advanced perspective, and I think it's it just does that thing so much better. And having both of those come out in the same year, I just never went back to the Diet Sig record.
I get that. I feel like I was looking for different things from each record,
which makes sense too.
Yeah. Kara Kara, Summer Megalith. This is like very pleasant, but not something that I listen to willingly. I was looking through like the related artists, and it was like Chastity, and I saw that band at the Thrasher Bands showcase, and they bored me to tears while they were on stage. So I understand why people who like them also like Kara Kara. And it's not even that Kara Kara is bad. It's just like they do what they do well. It's just not for me. And on the flip side, I feel like Bliss does actually something pretty similar to Kara Kara, like in the songwriting department. And I actually used to not really like this band very much. But this record has really, really good production, just like crushing production. And I feel like this was the end of when that like strained vocal style like was in vogue, and like right before it lost its appeal. The Bliss front person does it very, very well. I recommend it. Strange Ranger, Day Moon. I'm surprised to hear you be down on it, Kyle. I enjoyed it. It mostly goes for moods and grooves over like bangers.
Well, I mean, coming off of Rot Forever, this is like a way different direction.
Yeah, it's practically ambient, like in comparison. But I liked it. Sinai Vessel, Broken Legged. I felt like this was like the Evil Mirror version of the Free Throw record, in that this was also that band trying to go pop punk, but they did it in a much more elliptical and cerebral way, and it succeeds, but it doesn't hold my attention for very long. It's still better than the Free Throw record, and obviously, like, otherwise the songwriting approaches are pretty vastly different. And then Perspective, A Lovely Hand to Hold. I didn't actually realize that this band had songs that weren't Pepe Sylvia, so I probably shouldn't have talked about it.
Ooh, okay. Oliver Houston, I was kind of unfamiliar with, to be honest, but I did dig it. Not something I would have been aware of in 2017, but I think is a little more in tune with my interests.
There are emo darlings at this time.
That makes perfect sense to me.
They were very much on our radar.
And I think deservedly so. The Obsessives don't care about it all. Not for me. KDL, and I've kind of already said my piece, but I really love that record. Probably my favorite from this batch. I Hate Sex is a great Screamo record. I like Screamo a lot. So yeah, definitely for me. Great Grandpa, I like the new record better, even though it's kind of sleepy indie rock that I wouldn't normally go for, but I think it's about as well done as that can be. Graduating Life, I do not care about. Del Paxton, this record's solid. It's one of those where I remember when it came out being like, oh, this is kind of cool, but it just doesn't have anything that makes me want to go back to it. I think it's totally serviceable for what it is. Diet Sig, again, this felt like a little bit of a letdown for me, just because I liked the earlier stuff and I liked the energy. But I also saw them like probably a dozen times within a couple of years, just because of them opening shows and at fests and stuff. So I might have been a little burned out on it. Cara is, again, a band that's not really for me. I don't hate it, but it's just it's a little too tidied up for my liking, a little too clean. For me to really resonate with it. And it's kind of my issue with a lot of bands from this era is that, like, not that I think everything needs to be some, like, 4-track basement recording, but as a lot of these bands started getting a little cleaner and a little bigger and aiming for bigger rooms, it kind of betrayed what I liked about it. And as it went more indie, it just kind of lost me.
This is the record that Jake from Modern Baseball produced, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I feel like he was trying to make them sound like, production-wise, kind of like Slaughter Beach Dog.
Yeah, and I like Slaughter Beach Dog, but I don't really care for this very much.
I don't like Slaughter Beach Dog, so...
That's fair. Bliss, I also don't really like on this list, or Perspective, A Lovely Hand to Hold. The last two, Strange Ranger, this is just not the record. I think the Sioux Falls LP I really love. I think the new one's better. And Silent Vessel, again, it's cool, but I never go back to it.
I think this is perhaps like the most succinct that we've ever gone through this list.
There's just so many. I had to really burn through it.
Yeah,
I know, but like this is like the first list where I feel like everyone involved like knew what they wanted to say, and we were just like on it.
Well, I think it's when you have a list that's not like when there's no when there's a clear top candidate, it's really hard to like be like, no, this one. Like there are obvious choices in this group, and so I think there's only one record that I would say is genuinely awful, and that's the fucking what's their name, Front Bottoms. Everything else, like there's nothing that I'm like, oh, I hate this or I really love this. It's just kind of in that mid era or mid range where it's like, at the worst, this is like a 4.5. At the best, this is like a 7. And
Right.
when you have stuff that's in that era or that area, it's just really hard to find anything to say about it.
Yeah. Still though, Kyle, listen to I Hate Sex.
Yeah,
Like,
that's my glaring error.
you got two of the biggest screamo aficionados telling you, like, listen to this shit. It's top tier scrams.
Is it like what people would call basement screamo?
No, it's actually very well produced.
Oh, okay.
Like it's not. It's not. I remember. I think at like, the end of this year when we were doing our year-end list, and I talked about that. They go under the name Echelons now, so I forget what their old name used to be. But it's the band that recorded everything on a dictaphone and a webcam.
That's that band. Okay.
Yeah. Unable to fully embrace this happiness. That band. I actually forgot that about them, and they should have been on this list. Also, we didn't talk about Ostraka.
Also very good.
Yeah, that
record was number 2 on the screamo list for me. Really
Yeah.
great record.
Yeah, both those are very much worth your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have listened to Ostraka. I listened to it today because a friend sent it to me and was like, "Hey, have you heard this?" I was like, "Yes, I have." Another one that I like feel bad for not putting on here was the Two Nights record. I think that was an EP.
That record was really good.
Yeah.
Like really solid pop songwriting.
Yep.
Non-emo records this year. The Converge record was really good. The Left Behind record was phenomenal. And the Paramore record, stellar. Maybe their best one.
I looked for my album of the year list for this year, and it's just funny. It's just like Cloud Nothings, Sheer Meg, Meatwave, Migos, What Gives, Send, Oliver Houston, Sandy Alex G, Slowdive, and Brockhampton. Apparently I was a little basic bitch that year, sprinkled in with like 3 DIY releases.
Hey, I mean, anyone who votes for Meatwave is a friend in my world.
Yeah,
So I'm with that.
Yeah, that is a perfect record though. The Incessant is
it's great.
It's like the record that I think that will always be like the record for them.
I think
Sandy
that
Alex G and Brockhampton though. that's some basic shit.
Yeah.
I feel like Brockhampton was less basic at the time.
No, I actually told my friend today, I was like, I'm already nostalgic for 2017 because Brockhampton were like an exciting thing, and now I don't know what they did. I mean, they like couldn't be a secret. That's the thing. Like, I don't blame them for anything. Like, they were bound to be mainstream.
Because they're such a band of like the internet forum, like oeuvre. They got real big with those types of like tastemakers, and so their fan base ended up being, like the cast of The Big Bang Theory. And I feel like JPEG Mafia's heading that way too.
It's unfortunate, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that it? Did we like successfully do like an hour-and-a-half episode? Like,
yeah.
Did we do it? Holy shit!
It seems quick because we didn't go for 3 hours, right?
And also because you have a guest who can't really talk, so that helps.